As a business owner, have you ever wished that you had a guide or a roadmap to make sure that the direction you were headed in was the right one? Well, this is a very common issue that we see with business owners that we work with. And today, what we're going to do is we're going to unpack a guide that's going to show you how to make sure that you get to where you want to go into the future. My name is Luke Turner, co founder of Moment Private Wealth, where we help athletes and entrepreneurs get smarter with their money. All right, so when you think about a guide, we typically are going to want to break it down into a couple of different components. And for business owners, it really breaks it down into 5 key areas. It's what does a financial plan for a business owner look like? What does risk management for a business owner look like? Estate planning for a business owner, tax planning, and investment management. And what I will tell you is that for each of those 5 areas, it's unique when you're a business owner versus an employee. And for us, we want to make sure that the advice that we're giving is tailored and specific to those business owners that are having those experiences. So let's go ahead and dive right in. The first area we want to look at is financial planning for business owners. And I want us to think about this as our roadmap. So back in the 90s, before the internet, there was this thing called a triptych that you got from AAA. And it was a little book that they would send you that would be your guide throughout the course of your entire road trip. And this is before the day of MapQuest, before the day of GPS. And these were really nice for a period in time. But the issue that many people came up with were as they were driving down the road, there was a detour that happened. There was a snowstorm that made them have to change course. And all they had was this stagnant piece of paper. And financial planning for business owners is typically very similar to that, where somebody gives you a stack of 50 pieces of paper, you put it in your drawer and you say that I have a financial plan. But the reality is the financial plan, it's this ever-changing, ever-living document. And we need to stop thinking about financial planning as a one-time event, and rather it's a GPS where we're going to make adjustments along the way. We're going to change what does our lifestyle look like? How much money are we making? What is the time frame that we're going to actually sell our business in? And each of those components is going to be an adjustment along our journey. But really the goal for these business owners is that when we think about that financial plan, we're going to draw out that roadmap and we are going to say, well, what's our North Star? Where do we want to go to? And make sure that every 6 months, every quarter, we're making those proper adjustments. So that way, when we wake up 20 years down the road, 10 years down the road, 5 years down the road from now, we are exactly where we thought we would be. The worst thing that could happen in a financial plan is we get that draft done one time and we set our course and we don't realize that we're actually driving the wrong direction. So when you're looking at your financial plan, make sure that it's not a triptych and it's a GPS. All right, the next area of our guide is going to be risk management for business owners. So when we think about risk management, we typically want to break those risks down into 2 different categories. We have the insurable risk, which we can buy insurance to protect against, and then we have the uninsurable risks. And what I want to tell you about risk management is that there is never going to be a perfect solution to protect you against any and every risk. I would imagine if you've run a business for any period in time, there's been some risk that has popped up that you thought everything was covered, but at the end of the day, something happens in your business and you realize that you're not covered. Our goal is that in our risk management plan, we are taking into account as much as we possibly can and trying to eliminate as many variables as possible. So let's just look at a couple of the different insurable and uninsurable risks that we typically see for business owners. Typically on the insurable side, the 2 most common things that we're solving for is 1, we are buying a life insurance to replace your income for your family. So you're producing income for your family. We want to make sure that there is enough money set aside that if that income goes away, your family can continue living their lifestyle. That's the first most common example. And the second most common example is buying out your partner's share. So we are in a situation that you and your partner, you're 50-50 partners, and the business is worth $10 million. So you each need $5 million of liquidity to buy out the other person's shares if something were to happen to you. So typically what we see is that's an insurable risk where we'll buy life insurance to protect against, the downside that something happens to one partner and they don't have $5 million to buy it out. That life insurance policy would kick in and we'd be able to buy that out. So those are the 2 most common we see on the insurable risk side. But what I really like to talk about with business owners is often the uninsurable risks, because these are the things that often are harder to solve for. The 2 most common things that we see in business are going to be a bad investment that's made inside of the business. So think about this as we're going to extend into a different vertical. We're going to invest money into something that's outside of our typical scope, and it goes very poorly. And now we've used up all of our cash, or we've used up all of our margin to invest in this one vertical. And then something else goes awry in the main vertical, and we have this whole situation that we could at least foreseen this potentially happening, and making sure that we avoid that is key. So that's typically the first uninsurable risk that we see we want to talk about. And the second is bad debt. So it is very easy for business owners typically to take on debt, especially when things are going good. And honestly, for the business owners we work with, what we tell them is we want to make sure that we have as much access to capital as fast as we can when business is going good. When business is not going good, that is when it's much harder to get debt. But what we want to make sure that we avoid is poorly utilizing that debt. Oftentimes we see business owners who want to grow, they utilize, instead of equity in the business, they use debt in the business to grow it. And there's nothing wrong with utilizing debt. It certainly can be a catalyst to exponential growth in your business, but it's something that we need to be careful with. It's like fire, and we don't want to be in a situation that we light the wrong thing on fire and it burns our entire business down. So we need to be careful about taking on the bad forms of debt. So just to recap there, risk management for business owners, we need to make sure that we're taking into account both insurable and uninsurable risks. All right, the third area that we want to look at is estate planning for business owners. And when we think about estate planning for business owners, oftentimes I hear business owners tell me that they're not planning on dying anytime soon, and they're not even planning on retiring anytime soon. So why do I need to worry about my estate plan? And the reality is, think about estate planning the same way as you think about a SOP where you're planning for an emergency in your business. You never want to be in a situation that something catastrophic happens in your business and now you're making all these decisions under distress. And it's the same way in your estate plan. We don't want to be in a position where something catastrophic happens from a health perspective or a financial perspective, and now we're all of a sudden making these really big decisions under distress. So our goal is that our estate plan is going to draw these situations in advance, so that way we never put in a position that, again, we got to make these decisions under negative circumstances or distress. So typically when we look at estate planning for business owners, we're typically covering 5 different key areas. The first area is making sure that we have a trust in place. Now, there's a lot of different types of trusts that are in place, but the main key that I want to address here is that a trust is going to give you the opportunity to outline anything that has a title. We can give it direction in advance. So the reason why we typically look at putting trust in place are 2 primary reasons. One is that the items that are in trust with a title are going to avoid the probate process, which is a public process that will expose your information. Creditors can come and say that you owe them money. Again, we want to try to make this as smooth, seamless as possible and keep all of your information private. And then the second is that it's going to allow you better direction for your assets. So without a trust, you're going to have beneficiaries on accounts, you're going to have beneficiaries on things that have titles. And what happens is, if one of those beneficiaries were to pass away with you, again, now we're going to be back in the probate process. So our goal is to make sure that we avoid that. That's the first area. The second area is our healthcare directives and our financial directives. So these are very similar. These are powers of attorney. We want to make sure that, 1, we have a healthcare directive in place, that we have made the decisions in advance, who's going to make healthcare decisions for us and what types of decisions we want them to make. And then 2, financial powers of attorney. We want to make sure that we're putting ourselves in a situation that if we can no longer make decisions for ourselves, we have somebody else in place that we trust that can make those financial decisions. If you don't have those in place, what is going to happen is the government is going to step in and they're going to assign somebody to make those healthcare or those financial powers of attorney for you. And typically when I talk to business owners, they would rather them make the decision, not the government. So those are number 2 and number 3. The fourth thing that we need to look at as it relates to our estate planning is guardianship. So guardianship is for anybody that has minor children. If you don't have minor children, you can skip this section, but most people either have minor children or they know somebody that has minor children. So it's a good piece of information to know, is that we want to make sure that we have a will put in place that actually outlines where our kids are going to go, who are they going to go to, how are they going to be taken care of. That is the 4th component. And then our 5th component on the estate planning is making sure that we have what's called a pour over will in place. So Pour over will is typically what we see as the thing that heirs argue about the most. So think about this as the picture that's on the wall behind me, the wedding ring, the priceless family heirloom. This is where we can actually write in all the things that are tangible property, but they don't actually have a title. And so for us, we want to make sure that we are accounting for that in the estate planning for a business owner. All right, the fourth area to any great guide is going to be tax planning for business owners. So when we think about tax planning for business owners, think about this as a game of chess. And the game of chess is very complex. It's an ever-changing game. And there's always a move that could be made that would be better than another. And it's all about looking at, okay, what do we think is going to happen in the future? And that's really the way that we look at tax planning for business owners, is breaking down into two categories. We have our present year tax benefits and we have our future year tax benefits. And for a business owner, there's a fine line between how much do we want to allocate towards our present year tax benefits and how much do we allocate towards our future year tax benefits. And the reality is, it's my favorite answer. It depends. And it depends on what your tax rate is today. It depends on what your income is going to be in the future. It depends on what your income is going to be over the next 12 months versus over the next 3 years. All of these different items are things that need to be taken into account when we're doing tax planning. I see so many business owners fall into the trap of, how can I save money on taxes today? And not that there aren't a time and a place to save money and defer taxes today, but oftentimes we miss opportunities to save money in the long run by not looking at our future year tax benefits. So if you're a business owner, make sure that you're not only focused on how to save money today, but also how to save money in the future. And the fifth area to any great strategy or roadmap is going to be the investment management piece. So when we think about investment management for business owners, we typically are breaking this down into three distinct buckets. We have the war chest, we have the growth strategy, and we have the aspirational strategy. And typically, business owners start with only two of these buckets. They have the war chest, which is their cash in the business and in their personal operating accounts. And then they have their aspirational strategy, which is the ownership in their business. And for us, when we're working with business owners, we want to make sure that we have an investment management plan that's taking into account where they're at today and where they're going in the future. I see way too many people fall into the trap of, as liquidity starts to come in, the first thing they do is they pump money into their growth strategy, or bucket number two. And what ends up happening is there's now a liquidity need that comes up, and our growth strategy, we don't have access to it immediately. So when we think about investment management for business owners, we need to first account for our war chest. How much do we need in cash, bonds, fixed income? So that way, if something does come up either in the business or in your personal life, we are not in a cash crunch, okay? The second bucket then we're gonna focus on is the growth strategy. The growth strategy is gonna be more of our low risk growth assets. So think about these as public real estate assets, public equity or stock market investments, potentially private credit or private equity that we have access to. So that's gonna be our second bucket. And typically we wanna fill up buckets 1 and 2 before we even think about bucket 3. And again, the reason why that is because bucket 3 is often our most heavily allocated bucket today. The equity in our business is in bucket 3. So typically we don't need to allocate any more to bucket 3. But depending on a client's risk tolerance and where they're at from a balance sheet perspective, oftentimes we're still allocating more dollars to bucket 3. And bucket 3 is going to be things like private equity, venture capital, things that have the highest chance of outsized returns, but they also have the most significant risk of either a loss in capital or they are very illiquid in nature. So if you are a business owner today and you are confused about where you're going into the future, and if any of those 5 areas that we just talked through, you don't feel like you have a rock solid plan in place, feel free to check out in the comments below. There's a link to our website. You can schedule a call with the founder today and we'd be happy to help. Hope you have a great day.